Okay. Hi, welcome everybody. I hope you're all enjoying your week 6 Wednesday afternoon. Thank you for joining us. We host this session every year in anticipation of third year students who are in CEGU who are choosing between CP2 or the community project. Yeah. And the thesis. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Um, so we're going to go through a handful of things that you can think about over the next couple of weeks as you prepare for setting up for next year. Um, sorry. Um, so all students that are majoring in CEGU have to complete either a BA thesis or a community project to fulfill their fourth year capstone requirements. Students can complete either the BA thesis or the community project, but in order to receive honors in the major, you have to meet the following criteria. The first is you have to receive a high pass on the final BA thesis that you submit at the end of your fourth year, or you have to receive a high pass on the project that you submit for CP2. You also have to maintain a minimum overall GPA of a 3.25. So that includes your average GPA across all classes that you've taken at the University of Chicago, including in your other major. And then within CEGU, you have to maintain a GPA of a 3.7. Um, there is a third option in addition to the BA thesis and the community project, and that is our capstone course elective. You would essentially take two classes in your fourth year. One would be a capstone designated class that we decide upon, plus an elective that counts towards your CEGU major. That is not honors eligible. And you do have to petition into it. So you will have to set up a meeting with me and submit a petition form in order to get into the capstone course elective option. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the BA thesis, and then I'll hand it over to Mary Beth to talk about CP2. So the BA thesis, it's an extended piece of research, somewhere between 40 and 60 double-spaced pages, that is conducted independently by students under faculty supervision. That faculty supervision includes an individual thesis supervisor, plus me or whoever else is teaching the BA thesis colloquium, plus preceptors that we have. So we have a graduate student research mentor right now, and we also have a postdoctoral research mentor. I do not know at the moment whether we will have all of those resources next year, but there are a handful of people involved in the supervision process of the creation of your BA thesis. Your BA thesis needs to be guided by a question that is narrow and precise enough to be fully addressed in a single year, but also expansive enough to have broader scholarly relevance. It should also be something that can sustain your interest for 12 months. So, when you are thinking about a BA thesis topic, I would just suggest that you spend some time thinking about uh, how dedicated you are to that topic. I'm witnessing students right now sort of going through the intellectual burnout phase, and it happens to everybody. But you just want to make sure that this is something that you are generally committed to, genuinely committed to. Your thesis also needs to be supported by evidence. This can be quantitative evidence or it can be qualitative evidence. And it should be gathered from publicly available sources or generated through your own data collection. I have students right now that are doing BA theses that involve historical documents that come from archives that they've explored. And I also have students that are using publicly available data sets, satellite data, for instance. I have another group of students that are also conducting interviews and collecting interview data from various people that they're speaking with. So there are tons of options here. But your thesis does need to be supported by evidence. It can't just be based on what other people have already written and published about. Okay, so it's not just scholarly articles or book chapters that you're referencing. It's primary evidence that you're collecting from somewhere. And then your thesis is supervised by faculty with whom you have established shared expectations and with whom you work closely throughout the year. Um, so each individual, if you're in the thesis program, will have your own faculty advisor. I'll get more into sort of how that's going to be determined for next year in a minute. But it will be somebody that you will be working closely with. They will sort of be supervising the development of your research question, the kinds of data that you would collect to answer that question, the structure and organization of your thesis, your writing style. There are many different ways in which faculty advisors kind of work with students on these kinds of projects. A little bit about the process itself. So you are in your third year. Um, as a third year student on either February 27th or March 6th, which is the Fridays of week 8 and week 9, you'll be asked, strongly encouraged, I'll put it that way, to attend a thesis brainstorming session to begin to identify a topic, develop a research question, and identify an evidence base. Um, I believe Haley, our undergraduate research mentor, and Hong Jin, our postdoctoral research advisor, will be hosting both of those meetings. I have hosted them in the past and I found them very useful. It helps students who really have no idea what they want to write about, or they have a vague idea of what they want to write about, uh, really narrow in on a more precise question and resources that you can use to help you think through the development of your project at this early stage. Before April 3rd in the spring quarter, you will need to meet with a preceptor, so Haley or Hongjin, or possibly a member of Sigu's faculty, including myself, Sabina, Mary Beth, Jessica Landau, Ray Lodato, and Evan Carver, who I believe will be back by then. Yes, he will be back from leave by then. You'll need to explicitly name someone in your BA thesis application that you have spoken to. So this is a requirement. You do need to actually meet with somebody to talk about your project. Okay. Um, on April 3rd, you will submit your thesis application. And 2 weeks after that, you will be notified as to whether or not you have been accepted into the thesis program. It's not a barrier to entry, okay? If you apply for the thesis program, chances are you will get into the thesis program. But the application helps you think through the kind of project you want to do. It also helps us figure out who your faculty advisor could be if you haven't already established confirmation from them. Um, as a fourth year student, once you're in the BA thesis program, there are implicit expectations that you do research over the summer. Okay. There are a handful of small things that you have to submit by the end of spring quarter that set you up for summer. The students who have used their summers wisely tend to do really well in the thesis program. Students who squander their summers come into the thesis program in fall quarter not knowing what the hell they're doing. Okay. So I would strongly suggest that you set aside time during your summer to actually work on your project, whether that be reading secondary sources, collecting data, trying to refine research questions, etc. Um, Once fall quarter starts in your fourth year, you are required to enroll in 2 quarters of the BA thesis colloquium, one in the fall and one in the winter. We do not yet know what day or times those classes are going to be taught, but in order to be in the BA thesis program, it is required that you take the BA thesis colloquium. Okay. Um, the colloquium is a continuous year-long one-on-one, or sorry, In the BA thesis program, you will have continuous year-long one-on-one advising from myself, from your faculty advisor, from preceptors. And we help you through each stage of the thesis writing, research and writing process. And you receive feedback along the way. Okay. You don't just like write your thesis and then get feedback in spring quarter at the end of your fourth year. You get consistent feedback at almost every milestone that you get through. Um, at the very end of spring quarter, usually on the very last day of the quarter, you'll also be required to present a 10-minute presentation of your thesis, complete with PowerPoint slides at our annual BA Thesis Symposium. I suggest coming this year. It is, I think, May 30th. May 29th. Whatever the Friday is of finals week in spring quarter, we are having our BA Thesis Symposium in Swift Hall on the third floor in the lecture hall. So if you are interested in seeing what kinds of projects come out of the thesis program, I do strongly suggest attending at least part of it. You don't need to come for the whole day, but maybe come for a session to see how students are engaging with their research. Um, this is not an exhaustive list. These are some of the main topics that students have focused on over the years. Things including climate change, food and farming, transportation and mobility, sustainable practices, community engagement, energy and geography, environmental literatures, Chicago. I'll also add to this environmental health. I've worked with a few students over the past couple of years who have done environmental health projects. Um, if what you are interested in does not appear on this list, don't fret. You can come and see me or any other CGU faculty to talk about your ideas to see how it fits into CGU's themes. You will receive these slides at some point in the near future. This is a short list of sample theses that you can look through to see what a thesis actually looks like, and to see what kinds of topics students are working on or have worked on in the past. Again, this is not an exhaustive list. There are, I think, upwards of like 50 or 60 theses that are now available online that you can go through. Um, Many students are interested in working with human subjects for their thesis projects, i.e. conducting interviews. If you choose to go that route, you will need to get IRB approval, so Institutional Review Board approval. Um, Again, this contact information will be available to you, but if you do plan on interviewing people for your research projects, uh, I am going to ask that you reach out to me before the end of the school year to talk about that process. IRB can either go very smoothly if you are well prepared for it, or it can be a huge pain in the butt. I know that last year, one student of mine had a lot of trouble with IRB and didn't get IRB approval until about a month and a half before their thesis was officially due, because of a lot of back and forth with the IRB office. I've also had students that have submitted their IRB application and no one has really questioned it. It has gone through very smoothly. It really depends on the kind of project that you're doing, the kinds of interactions you want to have with human subjects, the types of questions you want to ask of them. Um, so all of that being said, come and get advice from me or from other faculty before you venture into this process so that we can help you make it as smooth as possible. This is a slide full of Chicago studies resources. If you are doing a Chicago-based research topic, I strongly encourage you to align yourself with Chicago studies and some of the programs and courses that they offer. I have had students in the past do projects on LA and like urban development. but they have taken summer courses through Chicago Studies that have taught them how to use GIS, how to access archives that tell you about property development in a city like Chicago. And then they take that experience and they apply it to something else. So if you're doing Chicago or you're doing anything urban focused, I strongly suggest looking through some of these resources. They're here to help you. This is what the BA thesis application form looks like. It's pretty streamlined. It's a Google form. We're going to ask you some basic questions like summarize your proposed research project, explain why it's important. How does your project align with CGU's curriculum and course of study? I would suggest going to CGU's website, reading through our mission statement. In the past, we've had students that are like, I'm going to write about something completely unrelated to CGU's themes. That's not going to be possible moving forward. So we do need to see that it aligns with something that is generally taught within CGU. We're also going to ask you to consider what kinds of qualitative or quantitative data or evidence you would like to use. Um, what research methods are you interested in? This is a big one. So I would think about all of the classes that you have taken up to this point. What kinds of research methods have you been introduced to? Have you taken archival history classes? Have you taken stats classes? Have you taken classes that introduce you to ethnography? If that's the case, please discuss those things in this part of the application. The rest of this, I will let you look through it. But again, please reach out to somebody before you click submit, just so that we can help you think through this. Okay, cool. So that pretty much concludes it for me in terms of the BA thesis process. I'll hand it over to Mary Beth to talk about the community project, and then we will take it from there.
Great, thank you, Topher. Thank you, Tess, for wiring us all up, and thank you everyone for being here. So I am going to talk about a program that's really in its first year, CP2. It stands for the Community Project Capstone Program, but thought we needed to come up with something a little snappier, so we came up with CP2, and it was launched this year. And what it really is about is students engaging with other students in a project team to work with organizations in the community on topics, problems of urgent concern to the organization. So you always want to align your interests with an organization's, but it's not here's what we think you should be doing, here's what we think is wrong, or here's what we think should be right. But it's like an organization has a problem, an issue, something they'd like some work done around, and we are there to engage with that. Students design, plan, and develop projects, learn how it, and so what are the kind of learning goals here? You learn how to design and carry out a project and manage it through an iterative and reflexive process, which is kind of like another nice way of saying like a sort of organic, sometimes messy process of research and delivery, product delivery, as it were, with a community an organization in the community that's sort of like a client. There's a bit of a consulting kind of aspect to this. I will turn over the podium to two students who are part of this year's inaugural cohort of CP2ers. Project teams work independently with faculty guidance from me. I'm the instructor of record, and with mentorship and collaboration, communication, in various degrees with with the organization. I mean, one stipulation we have for organizations is that they're available. It's not just to sort of sign up here, do this, and then come back when you're done. Um, I think in this process, if you're concerned about, like, I want to do research. We have done a lot of research this year. And I think a real value of of CP2 is that there's an accountability to something beyond your GPA or the professor or the peers in your class, in your thesis class, all of which are perfectly fine, but um, CP2 really allows you to develop those skills to communicate to a more diverse public, the public that's really outside the campus. What's the process here? CP2 is honors eligible. And it involves this year, half the students in CP2 are in the third year or fourth year. CP2, so by application only, it's very similar process to the thesis application. It's not so much a weed out as just sort of asking students to kind of clarify their goals and understand what you're signing up for. I mean, that's really the purpose, I think, of the application process for both the thesis and for CP2. By autumn quarter, and really realistically by the end of spring quarter, students in CP2 will be matched, as it were, with a group, their group of students, their team, as we've been calling we've sort of taken on that moniker, and the organization. And I'll be talking about organizations in a minute. And then in next year, you will enroll in two courses, one in the fall, community projects 1, and then surprise, surprise, community projects 2 in the winter. So we start with concept planning, research in the autumn, and then in the spring, assessment, communication, and then presentation. From autumn to winter. And then students will present their final projects in a public showcase open to the campus and community. We have a date to be determined for that. Again, this is our first year. We have truly been making the road by walking. And so I'm very grateful to the students who sort of gamely signed up for this new program this year. Students who are writing a thesis can also enroll in CP2 as a set of, a two-quarter sequence of electives. And I know some of the third year students this year in CP2 are planning to write a thesis too. So it's not, if you're not kind of locked in, like if you have the room in your schedule to do both, it would be challenging to do both simultaneously, but it's not, it's permitted. What do the classes look like? In the first quarter, we have sort of a kickoff meeting, connecting students' teams. As I told this year's students, like, meet your new best friends, share information, schedules, communication, etc. Then we really kind of launch in, talk about what it means to work with the community. Well, what does it mean to work in a team? What does it mean to work with the community project? Sort of how do we design a project, and then how do we engage in project design? What kind of research, and then from that project, what research is necessary to accomplish the goals of the project? What does that look like? What do we have to then do? And the research is often a little different. I mean, the kinds of that I think both students who are here, we've done a lot of research. It's a little bit different than the kind of research you would do for a thesis. We're not necessarily running to the reg or looking up secondary sources, but we are doing a lot of documentary research, interviews, and just a lot of critical thinking. Project management, where the rubber meets the road. Here's our goals. Here's what we're doing. How are we going to get it done? This is an ongoing piece of this process. And then at the end of the quarter, okay, this is what we end in the first quarter kind of with a map of where we're going to go in the second quarter. So current CP2 projects, there are two. Um, and the first one I'll mention is Chickaming Open Lands, which I've just called Nature for All. And Daphne, do you want to say a couple minutes, speak for a couple minutes, stand up and.
Yeah. Yeah, so
Thank you for coming.
yeah. So this is one of the projects that we're engaging in this year. So it's with Chickadee Open Lands. They're a land trust based in Darien County, Michigan. So it's not too far from here. And essentially they want to make their trails more accessible. So we've sort of done like a bunch of research into thinking about like what does accessibility look like in a recreational sense. Some of it has also done with like been related to like schools, since like their field trips and stuff like that that will occur on their various trails. They're about like 14. We've also used some data from previous like students who worked with I think the field station nearby to like collect data and do audits. What else? We've looked into like grant research, a landscape analysis of like other nearby organizations. And then this quarter we started to do more interviews with like local community members and also people from those various different kinds of organizations to sort of both like through the entire process sort of like understand what accessibility means specifically for like our target audience, since like everyone has different needs, and then also see like what kinds of things that different organizations are doing, what grants they're using, what like gaps there are, etc. So yeah, let's not sure if I'm missing anything, but we've sort of like been throughout the process, like really working with people from Chickadee Open Lands and sort of like meeting with them as check-ins and yeah.
The survey.
Oh yes, we also sent a survey. So like we've done like in-person visits too, and then we developed a survey to send out to like include on the website. And two of our members also went to like one of the events in the fall and also got some data from there.
Thank you. Thank you, Daphne. So this has been a challenge because it's close, but it's far, and it's also a different time zone. So a number of times we've been about an hour late for things because we've said 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, and then we realize, oh, it's already 10 o'clock in Berrien County. But this has been a very, very interesting and rewarding project that, probably has legs for going into next year in some kind of newer, different iteration. So this is the other project, the other teams. So we have Team Chickaming and Team Open Lands. The only thing that these have, for some reason, we have two projects, each with the words Open Lands. That's the only thing they have in common, though. What is an arborist anyway, and how to become one? And Rebecca Shaw is here to speak to that.
So yeah, we're working with an organization called Open Lands, and basically they have this arborist program, and they train arborists for 3 years and they employ them for 1 year. But Open Lands is kind of trying to like move away from that model, and they don't want to employ people anymore. So we kind of did like a landscape analysis of like green jobs and like what other green organizations were kind of doing in that sense. So we started with that, and then we talked to employers, we talked to employees to like see what they would be missing if they didn't have like the employment aspect for 1 year, like what their future employers would be missing from that and like how we could supplement that. And so we also talked to like community colleges to see if they could supplement that as well. It's been a lot of interviewing this quarter. I feel like last quarter was like kind of more of like a landscape analysis kind of thing. It's also proved to be very like almost like consulting heavy. Like I remember Mary Beth was saying something like it's kind of related to consulting, because we do have to see what Open Lands wants, but we also have to see what the employers want. And so yeah, we kind of like had our hands in a bunch of buckets. I feel like it's been really rewarding like seeing exactly where our project has been going and that it will be applicable to like future generations of apprentices. So yeah. I should add more.
Thank you.
It's been fun.
Right, so we have, and in some, we've been working with two organizations, each of which had a problem. In Chickamings, how can we make our trails more accessible? What does that really mean? And by landscape analysis, it was like, okay, what are all the other nature spaces in Southwest Michigan? What are they doing? The Parks Department, other trails, et cetera. And that's been the work. In open lands, we have this arborist apprenticeship program. It has a particular structure. We don't want to do this. We want to change it. How do we change it? What are we going to do? We did a landscape analysis in this case of and this is like really what is the sort of institutional landscape? How are other places like Wisconsin and Colorado? How do they organize their arborist apprenticeships? So we've been talking to people in other states. And that was the problem. And so we're in the process of kind of offering, but in both cases, really offering resources. It's not, we're not solving problems, but we're saying, here are some ideas that you should think about. And here's some strategies. Here's how other people are doing it. Here's how other people are addressing accessibility in your own community. Here's how other organizations are training arborists, tree care workers, in the country. But then ultimately the decision is up to the organizations, what they do with our work. And that is kind of the nature of consulting. All you can do is really offer your ideas. So that's what we're doing during the current year. Next year, we have two projects. I don't have really much to say about them, but we currently have two projects queued up for next year. One is with Equiticity. I don't know if anybody saw, was in Sabina's class last quarter, the urban design with nature, when she had someone from Equiticity come in. And we are going to take on the worst, apparently the worst intersection. There's so much competition for that title, which is the intersection of I was going to say Stony Island and 79th Street. That there's like 7 corners. There's many of those, but anyway, this apparently always makes the is up there. It's like the top. It's a dubious distinction, the worst intersection in Chicago. Equiticity is really interested in having some students really to help them think about what kind of proposals for change could be developed for this intersection that could be offered to the city and the state, what are other community organizations and on the south side doing. And for those of you who don't know, Equiticity is a mobility justice nonprofit in the city of Chicago. So they are interested in working with us, and that is moving forward. The other project we have queued up for next year is with the Morton Arboretum, a very, very different project. And I can thank my colleague Jessica Landau for kind of bringing this to CP2. The Morton Arboretum, how many people know about the Arboretum? It's in the western suburbs, but it's, I guess it continues the tree theme into next year. But for several decades ago, and for a few decades, Mae Watts was employed at the Arboretum as a scientist, as a scientific illustrator. She pioneered so many things that we now take for granted around nature education, taking walks, having classrooms, going into schools and bringing species. She was quite a skilled artist as well. And the Morton Arboretum is interested in developing an exhibition related to her work. They have all of her papers, drawings. I mean, she used to draw maps of. They have her whole archive, professional archive, and I think some personal papers. And so we will be assisting the student team will be assisting the Morton Arboretum in developing, conceptualizing, and then executing an exhibit about May Watts. The application form, see if I can do this. Oh my God, and no surprise, another Google form. And this one, goes over, has asked some of the same questions. Why are you interested in participating in the community project track? What kinds of experience do you have? It's not like you have to have a lot of community experience, but if you have any, let us know. Any internship experience, anything else you've done outside school that you think would help you prepare to engage in community work? What specific areas, what kind of organization, any language skill as a special skill. And then again, these same sort of things these same sort of just understanding what you are signing up for, which concludes the BA thesis application as well as this, like that you will be enrolled in these classes, that it will not be your fifth class, but one of your main classes. And that, all those things. And that you understand. Now I have to get back to the PowerPoint. Is this yours? Okay. Anyway. Thank you. And Daphne and Rebecca are here.
So very briefly, the capstone course track, two classes that you would take during your fourth year. One is a designated capstone course, and the other is an elective of your choosing that aligns with CEGU themes and is cross-listed with CEGU. Just if this is the direction you want to go in, please just be sure to reach out to me. I'll give you a petition form. You can fill it out and submit it, et cetera, et cetera. I won't go over this since we already went over much of this, but you will have access to it. Last main thing that I want to talk about, grants and prizes. So for BA thesis research in particular, and in some cases like independent studies classes that students have taken, you are eligible to apply for grants that are administered through CEGU. One is the Charles M. Gray Research Fellowship for undergraduate students. Up to $5,000 is available to you. It does not mean that you will get 5,000, but it is up to 5,000. Okay. The Redicott Family Environmental Research Grant for undergraduates, up to 2,500. And then we have a new research grant available starting this year, an environmental justice research grant, up to $1,000. You are eligible to apply for one or all three of these. Okay. What we have seen in the past, excluding the environmental justice grant because that's brand new, but what we've seen in the past is that students will apply for the Gray Fellowship and they'll get $1,500 to go to a place like Tokyo or Paris. That obviously doesn't cover the cost of going to either of those locations for a week or two. And so often that money is made up by applying for a second grant. It also looks really good on a CV if you're getting multiple grants at the same time. Just FYI. All research grants are going to be due by April 27th. We have significantly streamlined the process so that the application deadlines are the same and so that the application itself is the same. You just have to indicate which of these three or all three you're applying for on the actual Google form. It's relatively straightforward and self-explanatory. If you want to apply for a research grant, you are strongly encouraged to reach out to me, Jessica Landau, Sabina Scheck, or any other core CEGU faculty, so that we can help you think through writing a successful grant proposal. If you've never written a grant proposal, they're weird and they're specific. Okay, and so there is particular information that you do need to include. Get advice from somebody who has had to do this way too many times. Okay. We also have prizes available. So one, which we've had for quite a while, is the CGU BA Thesis Award for best BA thesis coming from CGU. And then we also have a new Environmental Justice BA Thesis Prize, which is actually not just specific to CGU, but it is available to any undergraduate student at the University of Chicago who is doing a research project that involves environmental justice. Chances are they're also aligned with CGU and a part of CGU as a student, but sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're in a completely different program and they're not double majoring or triple majoring. And so this new prize is available to anyone who is working on environmental justice issues. This is useful contact information that we encourage you to use as you think through either of the two options available to you, either CP2 or the thesis. There's also a handful of relevant links that you should probably explore, especially the IRB information slides, the Chicago Studies Undergraduate or Research Prize, and then this last one, the Knowledge at U Chicago. That is kind of your access point to all BA theses that have been written at the University of Chicago that have been uploaded. You can look through CGU and also old like environmental and urban studies theses as you think through projects that you would want to do for yourself next year. So that is everything that we have for you. I know that that was a lot of information. Um, are there any questions that Mary Beth or I or Tess can answer at this particular moment in time? Yeah, Lucy. That's totally fine. So your faculty advisor would not necessarily need to be your faculty advisor would not necessarily need to be a core CGU faculty member. In fact, they don't even need to be affiliated with CGU. It can be an econ professor or a psychology professor, but it does need to be somebody who has expertise in the topic that you hope to write about. Also, with regard to faculty advisors, so this upcoming application cycle, thesis application cycle, you have two options available to you. One is get confirmation from a faculty member before you submit your BA thesis application. Confirmation where they are agreeing to serve as your faculty supervisor next year. That's option one. Option two is you don't list anybody in the application form, and CGU faculty look through your application and decide for you. Okay, we do a matching process where we assign a core CGU faculty member to your project. You're not going to be left without a faculty member, but you're also not required to secure somebody before you submit the application. You're welcome to do that if you want to, but you're not required to. Yes, what's your name? I don't think we've met. Natalie? Cool. Cool. Yep. You can absolutely overlap. I have students right now that are doing a thesis for three of their majors. Yeah. Um, I have many students do double major and they count their BA thesis for both majors. However, I will say this. CGU has requirements and you have to adhere to CGU's requirements. So you have to enroll in the BA thesis colloquium, you have to meet our deadlines. We don't monitor what other programs require of you. So you essentially have to treat it as two separate programs, and you have to find a way to make your thesis match the requirements of both programs. We don't communicate with public policy or with history or with environmental science. We sort of monitor ourselves. So it's really up to the student to decide how they can balance the requirements of both programs. But it is absolutely possible. And if you're doing law letters, I think this year we have like 3 students that are that are also law letters students that are writing a CU thesis. So, yeah.
You know, I know there are programs that do not to do that, so you make sure that whatever. Like, I don't think sociology, like, they do, because I remember last year, Julie, I had to do two. They're just good notes requirements, yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
And there's like a really simple form on the college website that says you're writing one thesis for two majors that you have to get the director of undergraduate studies of both programs to sign up.
The other thing I'll mention is that different programs, different departments have different requirements about whether you enroll in their BA thesis colloquium. Last year, we ran into the issue of students who were double majoring in CGU and in history, but CGU and history had their BA thesis colloquium at the exact same time on the exact same days. And those students were then asked to choose which major they were going to write their BA thesis for. Because we both required that students enroll in those BA thesis programs. So just be aware of that when you're looking at class schedules for next year as they come out later in the summer, that like you're not overlapping your thesis classes. Okay. Yeah.
You need IRB approval to get those grants that you were talking about?
That was a great question. For wait.
The Charles.
Yes. So for the Charles Gray Fellowship, you do need to have IRB approval. You need to have demonstrated that you have submitted an IRB application, I believe. You don't have to have official approval because we can't really regulate IRB's workflow. But you do have to demonstrate that you have submitted an IRB application. For the other two, if you've already, because the deadlines are all the same, it doesn't necessarily matter whether the other two required or not in your case, because you would have to do it for the Gray Fellowship. Yeah. It is based on how you self-report anticipated expenses. It is also based on, we take into consideration the number of applicants and the amount of need across different applications. And so if a student says, I need $1,000 to go to Springfield, Illinois for 3 days to conduct archival research, and I need a train ticket and food and hotel, chances are that's going to be covered in full from various grants. If you are saying, I need to go to Tokyo for 2 weeks to conduct research, you will get money most likely from multiple pots, but we can't guarantee that we can cover the entire amount. Yeah.
I don't know if this is like a detail that's too detailed. But the other thing I would say, if you are applying for grant, it's important to apply for things that need to be paid for, like a lot of things that, like, you know, entrance fees to archives or even copying and, because a lot of things are digital and, you know, there's, and like supplies, like this sort of like a general category, like that are just, it's not clear. I mean, ask for what you need, but be specific about what you need and make sure that they're really things that are real.
Yeah.
Not like just a kind of like, I want to round it up to $50, so I'll put $50.
Yeah.
Necessities or it's miscellaneous or something.
Yeah, or like emergency funds. I need $500 for an emergency. And it's like, well, what's the emergency hasn't happened yet. We're not gonna give you money for something that hasn't happened. So it also does not cover rent. Yes. So if you are doing a Chicago-based project, you're still able to apply for these grants, but you would have to use that money for transportation, and for food, entrance fees, If you're doing something at like the Field Museum, for instance, that's where you could use the money in a place like Chicago, but you can't use it to pay for rent during the summer.
And that's because the donors have work. So it's
Yeah.
not, you know, people living in tents or something.
Yeah, the contract says that you can't do it. There was something else that I was going to mention about this. The budget that you submit for a grant needs to, what, as Mary Beth was saying, like it does need to be specific, and often we find that grant applications that are unsuccessful are ones that don't provide budgets that accurately reflect what the student needs. So like putting down like I need to make copies and it's going to cost me $200 to do that at an archive. Archives usually aren't charging that much money to make copies of things. Plus you have a cell phone that you can like take pictures with. And so that's where there's sort of some disjointedness between student expectations and what we can actually offer money for. Again, we have examples of successful grant applications. It just requires that you reach out to us and meet with us to discuss them. Any other questions? Cool. Awesome. Well, we'll be around for a few minutes to answer any one-on-one questions that you might have.